man, those jets. We barricaded the door one time. We barricaded the door and like locked ourselves in because they kept harassing us. Like if our shirt was untucked a little bit, they wanted to take us to confinement. If our shoelaces were untied, they wanted to take us to confinement. And Madison was known for that. They were known for writing, on average, 3 DRs per inmate. So there was like 700 people there at my first institution, and they wrote like 2,100 DRs a year. So it was DR heavy, disciplinary referral heavy, and we were just fed up with it. And I remember the dorm sergeant was out there, and the captain's like, "Hey, go in there and get your dorm straight." And dude, his name was Big Mac. His name was McDonald. He was a huge officer. He was like 6'8", very fat. And he's like, I ain't going in there. He got a little squeaky voice. I ain't going in there. Them just got knives and batteries and locks on side. I ain't going in there. So they kind of had to negotiate with us a little bit. And they were like, look, we're going to do this for you. We're going to try and back off y'all a little bit. You know, y'all calm down. So we'll calm down, go everything back to normal operations. And then as soon as they come up with the nonsense again, we back at it again. So it was a give and take. There was a lot of give and take. And, you know, you're trying to carve out something for yourself. You're trying to do something for yourself. You're trying to work out to keep your body in shape. You're trying to read to keep your mind in shape. You're trying to pray to keep your soul in shape. You know, go to education, get a GED. All that stuff kind of weighs on you, but it's an adjustment, man. And I've seen people not survive that adjustment. Seen people raped, seen people stabbed for something as small as a deodorant. Seen a dude on CM. They had been waiting for months. They had kept us locked down in CM for months. And then they came up with a law where this dude was fighting the close management process, which is 23. Really, it's not 23-hour day lockdown. It's 24-hour day lockdown. And you get to come out 3 times a week for a shower. So you spend three hours, maybe if that, outside your cell for showers and haircuts, if that. And then you get wrecked once a week. And that's for like 2 or 3 hours. So you maybe spend 5 hours out of your cell a week when you were in close management at this time. And if you miss showers or you missed rec, that's on you. You know, you lost out, you missed out. And you spend all that time either alone or in the cell with somebody who's probably crazy or weird, and you're just stuck in there. So they finally came up with a law that says these guys need more time out of their cell. This is not right. It's damaging people. It's not good. But these guys that had beef for years behind these doors, and they finally let these dudes out. And this dude owed a guy $1.79 deodorant, man. I won't forget this big ass dude, man. And he had a big ass knife and he stuck it through the back of this dude's head, man. Dude tried to run. He stabbed him straight through the back of his head as soon as they opened the doors. And man, the dude had about that much knife in his skull, man. Right? The knife was about this big, and he had about that much knife in his skull, sticking out the back of his skull. And somehow he lived. But man, the dude was bleeding, and the dude's trying to pull the knife out of his head, and he can't get the knife out of his head. He's trying to pull, he's trying to tug, and it's just caught in his skull. So he just gives up on it, and the guard's screaming, "Hey, stop, you need to stop." They're not running up there with this big ass dude with his big ass knife, you know? And he just starts kicking the dude down the stairs, kicking the dude down the stairs. And I remember the whole floor was just covered in blood everywhere. And this dude was prepared and ready to take another man's life behind $1.79 deodorant. Now there's principles behind it, and there's morals behind it. Oh, this dude ain't gonna try me. But still, essentially, it comes down to this dude was gonna take this dude's life for $1.79 deodorant. And if that doesn't describe the mentality of prison, I don't know what will. But that's early on. Those are the early years.
How were you adjusting to prison life with a life sentence? I mean, at 16 years old, were you just like screw everything mentality and wilding out? Or were you trying to program right and get your education and do programs? Like, what was your everyday, day-to-day schedule like at the beginning of your bid?
So me, myself, man, being who I was, being a member of the Insane Gangster Disciples at the time, I was young, man, and I had been raised in this on the street. A lot of dudes hadn't been raised in the street at that time. You know, I felt the need to succeed, to achieve something. So the only thing that I could achieve in there was to be the best version of a criminal at that time. So I was really on some, I don't care about programming. I ain't care about that. I'm trying to survive this, and I'm trying to live in a little bit of comfort. So, I was recruiting and bringing guys to me, and, because I knew the abuse of what a higher ranking dude can do to a younger minded dude. So I wasn't trying to let nobody else do that to these young dudes. I was just trying to keep them close together and keep that little aspect of family together. And we did well. We did well inside the prison system, man. And that was it. That was my main focus, man. I was just steady, very militant, very disciplined. I didn't do a lot of laughing because I didn't want anybody to take me as a joke. So even at that time, at that young age, I was just very focused. I didn't play a lot of games, even though I love basketball, you know. I didn't play a lot of games. I learned cards. I learned sign language. Just learn what you can learn. I learned how to key a lock. You ever heard about keying a lock, EI?
No, go ahead and explain it for the viewers, brother.
So I'm gonna explain this. I think EI knows as soon as I start explaining it. So everybody's got a master lock, like a combination lock on their locker. And, you know, mostly that was just to keep the police out because guys could key locks. So what we do is we take a soda can and cut a small piece of aluminum out of it, and we'd wiggle and jam it down in there so that it slipped the lock and you could pop the lock open. Well, that's one of the things you had to learn, because if your homeboy goes to confinement and he's got something in his locker that's of any kind of value, or maybe it's some contraband, maybe he's got some weed in there, he might have his knife in there, you know, hidden, stashed away. You want to get that out of there before the cops get to it. So you had to know how to key a lock, because who's remembering 20 locker combinations? You know, you have to write that stuff down. We ain't into writing all that stuff. We don't write stuff down in prison like that. And dudes didn't use names. Like, we would never know a person's real name. So everybody had a nickname. And I started off by calling myself Mike, you know, dudes knowing my name is Mike. And then I got a nickname. Everybody called me Strife. And that name still resonates in the prison system, the Florida Department of Prison System, as a good name. And that's something a man can be proud of. So
journeying from that first institution, and just like memories, whether it be there or other places, you know, like continue to take the viewer through a walkthrough throughout your bid, getting transferred from institution to institution, how that was, how long would you do, you know, how many years at each institution, and just some of the crazy, insane, or funny, or goofy, or just memorable moments, or even the good memories that you have throughout your years in prison. What did you do, 20, 21?
I did 26 years.
26. So just walk us through your prison journey, bro.
So prison, man, prison was, sometimes it was fun, sometimes it was sad, sometimes it was deadly, sometimes it was deadly dangerous, you know. But prison of itself, it's a whole different world, man. It's hard to explain to the layman who hasn't been there or experienced it, but you begin to hone skills and you begin to hone attributes inside of yourself. So you had to learn how to discern who's a good person and who's a bad person. You know, you had to learn who's a good person to bring close to you or who's a bad person to keep away from you. So men inherit that skill from prison, because you're not wearing a chain, you're not wearing different clothes, you're all wearing the same thing, bathing with the same soap, using the same deodorant. So you had to look in a man's eyes and be able to tell, hey, is this a good person or not? You know, hey, is this guy got his stuff together? Can I read that from his body language? Can I read that from his actions? So prison is like honing skills. Now, as you go on, you begin to see the dudes that are bad for you or bad for the people around you. You see them begin to slip. So a lot of funny stories, a lot of crazy stuff goes with dudes that began to fall off to the wayside. And they would try to run with the wolves, or they would try to run with it, fly with the eagles. But a lot of them dudes were just pigeons, man. A lot of dudes would be pigeon. You see them pigeon out later on. They'd end up doing non-heterosexual things and claiming that they were heterosexual. You know, that's flawed. That's like hypocritical. You know, if you're going to be gay and live in that life, you need to go be gay and live in that life. In prison, that's not something that's respected. That's not something like, oh man, that dude's gay, he's solid. That isn't something that comes up. Dudes would begin to fall by the wayside. You see them, they be real as fuck. 1 minute they're out there busting the dude's head open and standing on business and doing the most, 10 toes down, all the good stuff. Next day they're out there and they've got a guy named Jacqueline, whose real name is Jack in real life, out there squeezed up on the rec yard, you know, having what do they call it, caking now? You caking with your girl? They out there caking with a man. So that stuff, you see that stuff all the time. Dudes that get into gambling debt, they got gold teeth, they got tattoos, they're living the best life, and all of a sudden they're in a cell with another man. So that stuff was comedic. That stuff was funny, and it's talked about even now. You will hear about, oh man, that dude was so real, and he flawed out or whatever. Another thing is when dudes would begin to prey upon people and claim that they're good people. Men shouldn't prey upon other men in a manner that's disrespectful to the group at large. You shouldn't be preying upon the dudes around you. You should be fighting the system. That's just a fact. You should be standing against what's keeping you there. Whether you fight in the law library, whether you fight against the guards, or whatever you were doing, that's something that was respected way back when. So riots were respected. I was in 3 riots at a very young age. We burnt the rec house down at Hamilton CI. We kicked the fences down. We fought with the guards. I had literally been out of confinement for 3 days for a riot inside of another YO dormitory because I went to CM for a riot from Madison. So got out from CM, went to another YO dorm, the Hamilton JIT dorm, which was awesome. I met some of the best people in the world there. We got in a riot in the YO dorm because they were locking dudes up for no reason. They took all the leaders of the gang, myself included, all the gangs, pulled us in the back laundry room, and they're like, hey, one of the officers' sunglasses come up missing. We're going to lock all y'all up for it one at a time unless they come back up. So when they locked the first dude up, we had a riot. We had a stone cold riot. We chased the officers back into the officer station, and they were going to spare a few dudes. In fact, they were going to spare me. And I was like, you take my daughter to jail, you got to take me. They're like, man, sit down, sit down. I'm like, nah, you take him, you take me. And when they took me, all my dogs stood up and said, if you take him, you got to take all of us. So we all ended up in confinement. Did a quick little 30 days in solitary confinement. Solitary confinement sucks. You're locked in your cell, just like CM. Got out, was out for 3 days, was in a full-scale major riot on the compound where we burnt the rec house down at Hamilton CI. And then did 60 days for that. Almost went back to CM, but we were fighting the system in the only way we knew how. You know, that stuff ain't easy. Another couple stories that are like a little funny is that I was at Jackson during its worst time period. They ended up turning Jackson into an AMU because it was just so off the chain. Jackson was crazy. And
what is AMU for the viewers who don't know?
It's for gang members. Like, so they took Jackson CI and they turned it strictly gang members. So if you were a bad gang member, they sent you there. They make you walk with your hands on your head. You know, they make you stand with your hands in a certain way. They don't let you out a lot, and they try to make it like a punishment institution where they can keep an eye on you. But prior to that, Jackson was one of the most violent institutions in the state of Florida. And some of the stuff was weird. Some of the stuff was like weird stuff. Like a dude was trying to rape another dude, and he put a knife to him. He was trying to rape his cellie, and the dude ends up biting the dude's penis off and then throwing him off the rail. So the violence level was just high on some weird shit. But then again, the violence level was high on some other shit. Them dudes were snitching, so they cut their whole face open. They do that $150. You know what I mean? 150 stitches. So them dudes were using razors and cutting the dudes' faces open. The guards that discharge firearms all the time for riots on the rec yard. Guys fighting other guys, groups fighting other groups. Just bad situations, man, where everybody would pop off. I know a guy, he knew that something would go down every day and he was trying to get transferred away from Jackson. He walked around with a razor for a week and said, man, as soon as something pops off, I'm just going to cut myself and fall in line just to try and get away from here, because it was hard to get away from there. So you knew something was going down there. You could walk around any day of the week and it's just going down. They had the ambulance parked in the parking lot. They're picking these guys up. They're scooting them out. It wasn't a healthy environment. And psychologically, dudes just weren't making out of that institution, man. They weren't making it the right way. They'd either become hardened criminals or, you know, they'd be checking in, they get put on the door. Checking in is like when you request protective custody, or the dudes come and put you on the door. They beat you up, slide all your property and put you on the door and say you can't live here no more. A lot of that. A lot of dudes just getting exposed because it was such a violent institution. So you can't go into those violent institutions and pretend to be a tough guy and expect to live there. Your lifespan at a tough institution is 6 months. You're either getting put on the door, beat up, or you're getting exposed for whatever you really are other than a tough guy. So I spent 6 years at Jackson. I spent from 2008 to 2014, and you just see stuff, man. You see dudes just standing up to the police where they got to carve out the window because the doors are barricaded and throw smoke grenades in, CS tear gas grenades in, and then go in and pull them dudes out, pull them dudes out, pull them dudes out, and then lay them all on the ground like tuna fish, like the deadliest catch. They got them dudes laid out like the deadliest catch. They got them in handcuffs, they got them in shackles lined up, and then they're all like posing, like they ain't got their foot on them, but they standing around them like, oh, look at what we did. Nah, the CS tear gas did that. You didn't do that.
Whenever I interview a whole bunch of other people who've done time in different states or even the feds, we know that even in Florida, for the most part, like you can go to any institution or even a different dorm on the same pound and the culture can be different. So people's like experiences can be different. But for the most part, all of your 26 years in the Florida Department of Corrections, what are the politics like that you experience throughout the state? You know, especially out west, like in Cali, Texas, Arizona, it's really like race-based as well as like, you know, based upon sets. But how was the politics that you experienced throughout your...
Didn't know I am a rapper. My artist name is EI the King. Check out my music on all streaming platforms. Go to my other YouTube channel, EI the King. Check out my music videos. And I'm also releasing a documentary all year. It's really a docu-series. And every Wednesday, I drop a new video. As we've been documenting my transition home from prison and society, from the day of my release, we had a film crew at the gate just documenting my transition home from prison, now in society. Check it out on one of these links above.